It was a cold evening, the kind where the wind howls through the cracks in the window, and everything inside feels even more still than usual. Grandma Jane sat in her favorite chair by the fire, her hands trembling as she folded the blanket over her lap. The warmth of the fire didn't seem to reach her. Her mind was too full of thoughts, too full of fear. Her daughter Linda stood at the door, her face a mask of anger, though her voice trembled with emotion. "You won't need money in heaven, Mom," she said sharply. "You can't take anything with you. Why are you worried about all this?" Jane's heart stopped for a second. Those words hit her like a slap. Something was terribly wrong. Her daughter, her own flesh and blood, had just told her something she never thought she would hear. Her daughter had always been a believer, a faithful woman, but something about those words didn't sit right. What did Linda mean? Why was she saying it like that? Why would Linda even talk about heaven at a time like this? Before Jane could ask another question, Linda was gone, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed in the empty house, and for the first time in a long while, Jane felt alone, truly alone. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. How had it come to this? What had changed? The shock of Linda's words lingered in the air. Jane couldn't understand why her daughter was being so cold. Why was she acting like this? Was it money? Jane had always been careful with her savings, always looking out for her family. But what was this about heaven? Why would Linda say such a thing now? Suddenly, Jane felt a chill down her spine, not from the cold, but from the fear that something darker was happening beneath the surface. She had to know the truth. 2 weeks earlier, everything had seemed so different. Jane had been living quietly in her small house, surrounded by family, friends, and the comfort of her memories. She spent her days baking cookies, knitting, and watching the birds outside her window. Her daughter Linda had visited often, bringing her grandchildren with her. The house had felt alive with laughter, the sound of kids running around, and Linda's warm presence. But that all started to change when Linda came over one afternoon and asked if she could borrow some money. It wasn't like Linda to ask for money. She had always been proud, independent. Something in her eyes that day, though, something had been different. "I need a little help, Mom," Linda had said, sitting down beside her on the couch. "You know how things have been tight with the bills lately." Jane had nodded, concern crossing her face. She knew Linda's family had been struggling, but money wasn't a topic they often discussed openly. Linda's husband had been laid off from his job, and Jane knew they had been making sacrifices. But what Jane didn't understand was why Linda didn't just tell her what was really going on. "Of course, sweetheart," Jane had said, reaching for her checkbook. "How much do you need?" Linda hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a quieter voice. "I need $10,000 for something important." She paused as though trying to figure out how to explain, but the words seemed to stick in her throat. "You've always told me to save for the future. This is part of that." Jane's eyes widened. $10,000 was a lot of money. She knew Linda wasn't asking for that much because it was just for bills. There was something more to this request, but she didn't press her daughter for more details. She trusted Linda. She had to. The money had been handed over and Linda had promised to pay it back soon. But as days passed, Jane started noticing small, troubling things. Linda stopped visiting as often. The grandkids weren't around. And one evening, Jane noticed Linda's car parked outside, but when she knocked on the door, no one answered. That was when the doubts began to grow in Jane's mind. Was Linda hiding something from her? She started noticing odd changes in her daughter's behavior, things that didn't add up. Why did she avoid looking Jane in the eyes? Why was Linda suddenly so secretive? The next few days were tense, filled with unanswered questions. Jane couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Her trust in Linda, her own daughter, had been shaken, but she loved her too much to let this go without getting answers. One evening, Jane decided to follow Linda. It wasn't something she'd ever thought she would do, but her gut told her she had to. She needed to know the truth. She waited until Linda left the house, slipping out quietly behind her. Jane followed at a distance, trying to stay out of sight. Linda drove to a small building on the edge of town, a place Jane had never seen before. It was a nondescript building, the kind that blended in with everything else. Linda parked and went inside without looking back. Jane waited. She watched as Linda spent nearly an hour inside. When she finally came out, she was with a man, someone Jane didn't recognize. They were talking, laughing, and they seemed so comfortable with each other. It made Jane's heart race with worry. What was going on? Who was that man? When Linda drove off, Jane quickly followed her home. She was filled with a mix of fear, anger, and confusion. What had she just seen? Was her daughter involved in something shady? Had she been lying to her all this time? That night, Jane stayed up late, her mind whirling with questions. She had to confront Linda, but what if the truth was more than she could handle? The next day, Jane's worst fears were confirmed. Linda came over in the afternoon, and without warning, Jane demanded the truth. "What were you doing last night, Linda? Who was that man?" Linda looked at her, and for a moment it seemed as though she was about to say something, but instead she looked away, her face pale. "Mom, please," Linda said, her voice low. "You don't need to know everything, it's complicated." "No, it's not," Jane snapped. "I've always been there for you, Linda. You owe me the truth. What's going on?" Linda hesitated, then finally spoke, her words coming out in a rush. "I've been borrowing money, Mom, a lot of money, from a guy I shouldn't be involved with. I thought I could make it work, but now it's spiraling out of control. The money you gave me, he's been pressuring me to use it for something illegal. I didn't know how to tell you, I was ashamed." Jane stood frozen, her heart racing. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Linda had gotten mixed up in something dangerous, but why didn't she tell Jane? Why had she kept everything hidden? Before Jane could respond, Linda burst into tears. "I'm sorry, Mom, I never meant to hurt you." Jane's mind was spinning. She felt betrayed, yes, but also afraid for her daughter. What had Linda gotten herself into, and how could she get out of it? But before Jane could say anything else, Linda stood up, wiping her eyes. "I have to go. I'll fix this, I promise. I'll make everything right." And then, just like that, Linda was gone again, leaving Jane to wonder if she would ever see her daughter the same way again. It was several months before Jane saw Linda again. In that time, Jane had tried everything she could think of, praying, hopping, wishing her daughter would come back to her. She had tried reaching out, but Linda wouldn't answer her calls. And each time Jane went to visit her daughter, she was turned away at the door. Finally, one day, Linda appeared at Jane's door looking worn out, thinner than before, and carrying an air of defeat. She had been gone for so long that Jane barely recognized her, but Jane didn't say anything. She just opened the door and let her daughter inside. "I've lost everything, Mom," Linda said quietly. "I've paid back the money, but it's too late. The man I was dealing with, he's gone, and now everything is falling apart." Jane could see the guilt and sadness in Linda's eyes. She was broken, but something had changed in Jane too. The betrayal still hurt, but she had realized that her daughter needed her more than ever. "I forgive you, Linda," Jane said softly, her voice full of warmth, "but you need to trust me. No matter what, I'm always here for you." Linda nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have told you everything from the start." Together they sat down, and Jane held her daughter as she cried. For the first time in months, Jane felt at peace. The truth had come out. The betrayal had hurt, but they were still family. And in that moment, Jane knew that the most important thing was not money or secrets, it was the love between them. Sometimes silence can cause more harm than the truth ever could. Trust your instincts and never be afraid to speak up, even when it's hard. Family is precious, and the truth, no matter how painful, always finds its way to the surface.